speaking beyond our borders, on land, on the seas and in the air. This is the Chief Koti Show.
Hello folks, this is the Chief Koti Show, and of course I get to hang out with my friends, guys that I talk to almost on a daily basis. So we just put them on camera for you to understand the conversations, what we get to talk about. And one of my good friends here is Kiaran Knight, the guy who's behind ABC Auctions. So Kiaran, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, man. So it really feels so awkward for me to actually introduce this thing because we've been talking prior to this. But anyway, let's continue our conversation.
Like it never happened.
Perhaps you can just greet my friends who are also watching online now.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the Chief Koti Show.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Maybe we can start
Sure
there,
thing.
right? Yeah.
My name is Kiaran Knight. I'm the COO of ABC Auctions. I'm born and bred Zimbabwean. Love my home, love my country, and keen to tell stories that help people get better, get stronger, and get more confident.
So you tell us one.
Pshana.
So which school did you go to?
Which schools? Which schools?
Schools. Oh yeah, there's a very exciting journey around
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I started out in Matari. I went to Hillcrest, moved to Matari, moved to Harare, went to Hartman, and had a little short time at St. George's, and then was homeschooled.
What happened at St. George's? I'm keen to hear that.
I don't think I was the best pupil. I think I was still learning to mature and make wise decisions. So we left, and me and the voices went to homeschool. Yeah.
And that's the experience, vis-a-vis. If I were to get my kids to go into homeschooling versus an actual conventional school.
So I say homeschool, but they weren't homeschool. There were schools in people's homes, but it wasn't as if I was being personally tutored by someone at my home. So at the time, a lot of schools became super expensive and the private schools weren't an option anymore. So people started creating learning centers in their homes. It was great. It was great. I had some wonderful teachers. I had some wonderful peers. And at home schools at the time, it was people who either weren't made for conventional school, like maybe me.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I was made for conventional school. I struggled a lot, actually. But I had very...
I've got an unpopular
very,
opinion.
very sharp parents. They're like, you are going to go to school? But you made the grades. No, I didn't make it at all. So I failed my O-levels dismally.
Okay, that's fair.
Initially, the first attempt, right? Why? I was playing cricket.
Better things to do.
Cricket, football, basketball, everything except school. So they put me back in there, man.
How many times did you do O-levels?
I just did twice, yeah.
I did my driver's license 8 times. So was it the same for O-levels?
So, but when I eventually did it, I got it right and super right. Like
That's
a couple
cool.
of A's and all that, but showed that I was probably just playing, just a bad student.
Did you carry on playing sport while getting it really right?
Yeah. There's no choice. This is like a home where I had a very strict mom. She was just a soldier, to say the least. But I think she did good.
I think she did fine. I think she
I
did
like to
fine.
think so. Now I can wear shirt Monday without opening the button. So, but I want to talk about your journey, though.
Yeah, sure.
Very exciting to hear how you started and how you turned out, actually, which is really cool. And by the way, guys, when I phoned him, he said, do you want to come to the show? And he said, okay, cool, Chief, no problem. I just need to get a haircut. And I said to him, do you see a haircut on Mulungu like proper? He says, yeah, I believe me, you see that.
I had it cut. I didn't.
You didn't have a cut?
No, there's no time. There's no time for haircuts.
But at least I can see the...
You're lucky you got a shirt.
Not a vest. So your journey, within the entrepreneurial life,
Yeah.
of course, conventional or non-conventional schooling, but the business is always conventional.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same, especially in Zimbabwe. How did that start and where did it start?
Yeah, fair. Okay. So I didn't do my O-levels. I careered out of that. My first job, my first entrance into business, I was 16 and I worked at Triton Gym. The owner of the Triton Gym at the time took pity on me and could see that school wasn't for me. Could see me in the gym all the time, and she said, "Why don't you come and get involved?" And that was my first example of what working was. I come from a family where my father was an entrepreneur many times over. My mom, really steady, corporate, looked after businesses. So I had two dynamics. I had grandparents who were one a doctor, one an entrepreneur. So we had a mixed bag of experiences from my family, but nothing consistent. So stepping into my first job, and I won't bore you about every job because there's been a lot of them, it helped me learn people. It helped me also learn that maybe struggling in school wasn't the worst thing, and that conventional schooling might not have been for everyone. So fast forward from then, like a lot of people in that time, my family left the country and we went to the UK. And in the UK, everything that I grew up knowing in the life of privilege that I was born into in Zim, getting to the UK was a rebalancing, creating a baseline of what real life is for everyone. And there's a James Blunt song that says, "Don't sue me, James Blunt, if I misquote you." Do you think he's watching? Give it a shot. Give it a shot. He said, "Don't cry for me. I've been everyone I wanted to be." And the UK was the beginning of that journey from me. So I was a waiter. I did security. I was a debt collector for 6 or 7 years. I went into call centers. I played in so many different fields, corporate training. I hustled. I bought and sold things. I started businesses. I closed businesses. So my experience in England kind of gave me the opportunity to not be defined as something. And I think there's a lot to be said for the people who might struggle in school and can't give themselves a title. I think the world's pretty obsessed by it, that I'm going to be an accountant. I'm going to be a sportsman.
Titles, yeah.
You come into the world with this pre-generated idea that I'm going to be this because that's what school told me I was.
Yeah.
So I had the not unique experience. There's hundreds and thousands of millions of us who come into the world with no definition. But my journey allowed me to see what I was good at rather than what someone would call me.
Oh.
Does that answer your question?
But tell me a little bit about the debt collection, because I mean it's very relevant in this
Super
day
cool,
and
100%,
age of doing
100%.
business in
And it
Zimbabwe
also-
in particular.
It was
Those
also
guys that
my
don't pay on time. I'm talking about you. I'm gonna get Kiaran to come. Just tell me about that experience.
no.
How was it like?
So how did I get into it? I got into it through call centers. Because I've got no qualifications, the only thing that really worked for me was the fact that I could speak. And the fact that a Zimbabwean, in fact, anyone Southern African, whether you are black, white, Indian, or colored in England, you sound really harsh and aggressive. So taking a while to go from my Zimbabwean accent to a slightly English accent took a few years. So I learned how to negotiate on the phone, and we were collecting debt on the phone. And then slowly but surely I got out into the field and I got into the vans and I started doing bailiff work, door knocking and collecting debt. It was a great time for me. It was an absolutely exciting time for me. I've never been someone who wanted to be conventional. I didn't want to do things a certain way. I didn't know that at the time, but the excitement was drawing me into that. I don't think it's everything that people think or see on TV, where you're getting in a boxing match and taking things or, taking cars. It wasn't like that. It was more a very close human interaction with someone who didn't want to have an interaction with you, but needed to. You're not having a conversation. Well, can you really force anything? I don't know. Yes.
Yeah, I get it.
You've got a warrant.
In Zimbabwe, we don't do warrants. We just someone.
That's an opinion, Chief. I don't think our judicial system agrees. So it was more of the lesson on learning how to communicate with someone in a stressful time, learning how to get value out of someone who didn't necessarily see it in themselves to give it to you. So successful debt collection isn't from having a bomber jacket and dogs and being aggressive. It's actually about trying to convince someone why the debt you're collecting is probably important that they clear off. And in a soft environment like England, you can get away with a lot of debt not being paid. So to be successful in that arena means that you've had to learn empathy, understand where that person was, whether you agree with them or not for getting into debt or their circumstance. It doesn't matter. Your objective is to collect the debt and make sure that they're still whole by the time you leave. So that was a super interesting time for me. It taught me a great deal. It's probably my greatest learning curve.
Yeah, so I figure out it could have been because, like I said, when you're doing business, especially in an environment that we're operating in right now, I want to come into that now to say how has that experience, sort of pivoted you into running your own business right now, where you are, you
Yeah.
know, from an operations perspective,
Yeah.
where it's important to collect debt. It's also important to interact with people because you also want them to be your client again.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. How's that?
So what are the key lessons is that I think people need to learn boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think we in the world struggle with understanding what a moral boundary is or isn't.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, the power of empathy. I think empathy is our greatest super weapon. But we don't think about empathy. Empathy is me seeing the world from your perspective, understanding it and translating what I'm going to say to you or ask from you while accepting your perspective.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest reason why we struggle with peace in the world, whether it's relational, whether it's into business, whether it's even good marketing, I think the seed of it is understanding the other person before you start pushing your objective forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I think it isn't so much about being able to collect debt, it's being able to create the right relationships and having the boundaries to shape that relationship or stop the bad relationship continuing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and how's that experience also, you know, you are now a dad, you're a husband. Has that translated also to managing the home?
Oh mate, I try. I have an incredible wife. I think she's put up with a lot of my nonsense for
I can
many years.
imagine.
Yeah. And she's a teacher. She's a wonderful professional. She's an introvert, and then I roll into a life like a ball of flames with spikes on it. I hope it's translated to something meaningful in how I interact with my marriage. My home is a partnership. I as much as I'm the leader of my home is a partnership, and I have a strong partner with me. So there's constant negotiation, constant compromise, constant figuring out. An introvert will do it this way. I want to break it and do it this way. Having the empathy to see her perspective. Hopefully, more times than not, we find a middle ground.
How much individuality is there in a setup like that?
Major. I don't think you can have a good marriage without that person being a whole individual on their own.
We have a different setup sometimes.
We'll compare notes on our third marriages.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, and how are you enjoying fatherhood though?
I love being a father. I was lucky enough to have two girls, and I think girls make better dads. I never wanted to be a father. It was never part of my game plan. I knew I fell in love with my wife early on, but I never saw kids. I thought I'd be the fun uncle. Having kids has been incredible to me because you get to learn that little person hasn't had a fully formed mind, and you get to see it just incrementally grow. The greatest part about being in my marriage is my wife taught me what gentle parenting was. So we don't believe in corporal punishment. We don't believe in that kind of thing. And coming from a Zimbabwean home, it took some learning. But what it is, you get to accept that little mind can't quite comprehend that they're doing something wrong, and you get to teach and coach. I love it. Conversations with my girls is possibly our favorite thing. Yeah.
I've just also learned a little bit about that because I've got two young girls also. It's different. I have boys, and then I had a gap in between, and then I had the girls.
You got older, you got wiser, and then you got girls.
Yeah, and then now it's a different kind of thing. So where I would be like, hey,
yeah,
and I'm like, sweetie, don't do that. Come here. Come talk to me.
Why did you do that?
You know what I mean? It's a bit different. But again, these are things that also make us as individuals out there.
Yeah.
Because we learn a lot from being fathers, which is why I asked this, because I'm sure your compliment is quite huge at work, and you find yourself fathering at some point.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
And how's that journey working vis-a-vis what we just spoke about being a father at home?
Yeah.
You know, the experiences there.
So we've got a wonderful teammate who introduced me to a phrase, which I'm sure she stole from someone else, but I'll give it to her. And she said, you have to learn to be tough on the issues and tender or soft on the person. And that took me a long time to learn.
That's a difficult thing to do.
It certainly is, because you got to separate the person from the action.
Yeah.
Because you still need performance from the person regardless of the action. Also, poor actions could come from the development and the maturing of the person, never mind simply that person being a bad person for taking a bad action. So I think in my journey as a leader, and if I'm anything, I would like to be known as a leader. On my tombstone, I want to be a good leader. I think good leaders are short in the world. Parenting helped me learn to get softer and understand someone's point of view. So it's kind of a journey. In England, it was a very different environment. Everything's PC, there's a law for everything, and there's a lawsuit for everything. So you end up becoming overly soft. And then we came to Zim, and Zim, the culture is so
dynamic.
I think it's actually too far the other way. Whether it's a combination of colonial heritage, tribal heritage, or something in between, I feel like we are very hard people with each other. I think empathy is missing. And then I think we now have an exertion into education, which is sometimes missing the tribal or cultural elements. And now we have this intersect where we're trying to be very professional and PC, but we have this natural side that's really hard. And I find it very hard in Zim because you've got a lot of people who are very task orientated, farm worker type environment, factory owner, factory worker type environment. I find it really hard to navigate that. But in learning from better leaders around me, I could see that the objective is number one. If you're an objective-based leader, if you have a good process, you get good people. If you have a bad process, even the best person will be a bad person. Learning those lessons and creating some frameworks which allow me to understand people, and then bringing in that empathy from being a parent, that empathy from having failed before, that empathy from succeeding in front of other people. I think that's hopefully made me grow into a bit of a rounded leader.
You talk about processes and systems. How critical are they in business? Like if you were to share with my young brothers and young sisters
100%.
already in this world of business, which is so cruel sometimes,
100%. Do you know? I don't know if you've been stuck in a triage room, like a crash room in an emergency room. I was stuck in one in England once, and I remember a bit dazed looking up at the wall and seeing the CPR instructions written out on the wall. And in my head, I was like, you guys know what you're doing, right? CPR surely shouldn't be written on the wall. And the reason for that CPR written on the wall is that in the point of trauma, when something's not gone to plan, if you do not have a good plan, a good process, and good systems, on a bad day, you will lose your place. And on an overly good day, when you're really excited and happy, you'll also lose your way. A process also shows that this was pre-thought out. Right? What is business? Business is providing a solution that's valuable enough for someone to pay for it, and providing it in a way that can be done over and over again for profit over a long period of time. To me, that's the definition of a business. So if you don't have a system or a process, you're going to be blown and pushed around by whatever's happening. You're having a tough economic time, you'll degrade your system, you'll degrade your product. You're doing really well, you'll forget that the little things need to be checked along the way because you're making so much money, you're so happy, and then suddenly something bad happens and you've got nothing to come back to. Like your happy rut. I believe in the 3 Ps. Good processes require good people to create progress. But without good processes, you have good people. But if good people don't know what to do, you don't have anything because you won't make any progress. So I'm very strict on that. A good process means that you can find the right people to be good people, and that together those 2 things can make progress.
Fantastic. So we always talk about failure, right? And I think from what I can pick out, both you and I have failed a lot, but we're still standing.
100%.
What would be the lessons that you've drawn out of failure? Maybe share a bit of those moments where you feel like I actually failed, but
sure, 100%.
It worked to my advantage.
I think failure is, if I was to write a book about my life, I think if there was 10 chapters, 8 of them would be about failure. I think failure is a necessary part of success. I know that's a cliche. Read every personal development book, entrepreneur book, it's all been there, right? But I think...
waiting for yours, but
I have to learn to write first. You heard the story about my schooling. AI's here, don't worry, we'll be fine. What are some moments of failure? I think right from the beginning of my life there's been failure. When I was a child, I had a terrible stutter. 7 or 8 word stutter. Like I could not get a word out. We were talking about that guy earlier. That was me. And that meant that even though I hadn't failed, I had a perception that I was a failure from a very young age, up until the time I was about 15. So there's a perception of failure, which I think is more prevalent than actual failure.
Is it true though, just non sequitur, like people who stutter, they tend to be violent sometimes.
Yeah.
you like that?
I've not read that case study. I don't know. I don't know. Had a lot of violence brought against me because of my stutter. Yeah, a stutter can draw the violence out of other people. But
Please go ahead.
no, I don't think my stutter made me violent. Recovering from my stutter probably made. No, I'm joking. I was not violent. So I think there's two things. There's a perception of failure. There's the idea that I failed because I'm not A, B, or C. Then there's the actual act of failing, trying, going out there, stuffing it, and having to accept that this is broken. And I've experienced a good degree of both, but my life started with a perception of failure, and I think that's possibly more damaging over the long time. And then when you start being brave and doing something and failing, so my first venture was a little magazine. You step out, I went to do the advertising, and I just couldn't make it work. I just could not make it work. And at some point, my wife had to sit with me and going, Kiaran, we've got to call it. It hasn't, and she was very kind. It hasn't failed. It's not you, it's them. It's the market. It's a dying breed.
I never want to hear those words.
No, it was me. And it took stuff that. It took a little while to come to terms with the fact that, Kiaran, you stuffed it. And here's the reasons why you stuffed it. I think the main thing I've had to learn was I'm not afraid of failing in that concept. I'm afraid of failing in front of who.
Okay.
And I think if you fail enough, you have to take cognizance of what is failure to you, why are you avoiding failure, why are you holding on to something that's failed. I think those lessons help you cultivate the idea that if you're going to try something, there's a high probability it'll fail. But you have to learn to fail really fast and move on, and take the lessons. So if you talk to any of my team, any of my family, I call a part of my brain my fridge. Is that if I've tried something, conceptualized something, and it's not worked, I have to put it in my fridge. I then have to take the time to mentally go and discard the things that were actually rubbish and keep the few elements of that good idea as components for what I'm going to do next. And I found that practice has made failure.
Well, that's like a very difficult process because you actually have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And we're not that honest with ourselves that many times.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like maybe it's a societal thing.
Yeah. 100%.
And the ego. And
when you were growing up, did you lie to people? Did you tell lies about yourself? Yeah, 100%. Little white lies. And I made up an older brother because I wanted to be cool in front of my friends. I lied prolifically throughout my junior school years. And it was a point of judgment. It was a perception of failure and all that kind of thing goes with it. What I realize now as an adult that doesn't lie is that you go to bed with yourself. It doesn't matter who you've lied to during the day. You've got to, at some point, acknowledge who you are. And when you hit that pillow and there's no one else in the room, it's only you. Your anxiety, your fear, everything. It's all down to what you're going to catalog, keep, and get rid of. And if you don't, that's where I think we lead into infidelity, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, avoidance, I think addiction to sugar. I think there's a lot of that comes in because you're avoiding dealing. Have you heard that phrase that says that your greatest victory is hiding behind the thing you're avoiding most? And I think the first victory that we can have is to have that honest moment, take stock of who you are and what you are, and write it down. Acknowledge what you are, even if it's really bad. We talk about SWOT analysis, right? I don't think I've ever done a SWOT for a business, but I've done a SWOT for me many times. And your strengths and your opportunities become the brand and thing you build, and the weaknesses and your threats become a to-do list of things to avoid or repair.
Workouts,
right?
To get right.
But you can't get to that stage of self-actualization until you are honest with yourself.
Yeah, because sometimes, there's always, I guess, pressure of life. You live in this bubble. I'm this big corporate executive and I'm doing this well. And people are happy, or I think they're happy with me around. They're always praising me for what I'm doing. But when you really sit down, is it this what I really want to do? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Am I taking good care of my wife? Am I taking good care of my family? Am I taking good care of my friends? Things like that. I think they fall in the wayside because of that, phenomenon of lying to yourself, because you never really want to face your demons. But
you just nailed it. That whole list of things you did there. My employees, my colleagues, my wife, my friends, my kids. The problem is, unless you take responsibility for who and what you are, the one person that's needed to do all of that is not being taken care of, and that's you. And if you don't give yourself, I always imagine walking around with a backpack, and you get to choose what you put in your backpack, and you get to choose what to take out.
It gets heavier.
But if you put the wrong stuff in your backpack, and now your kids need something from you, how are you getting there fast enough? How are you responding to it? You can't, because you're carrying yesterday's baggage. You're carrying his expectations. You're carrying her thoughts. You're carrying, that's what I'm saying. You're never afraid of failing. You're scared of failing in front of who?
Yeah.
If you can acknowledge that.
And that's how we roll most of the time.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, look at the most successful people on the stage at the moment. Look at Elon Musk. He seems completely unapologetic for absolutely anything he does. He doesn't even say what I did was right or wrong. He's just like, yeah, I did it.
Yeah. Scares me a little bit.
Oh, he's terrifying. He's terrifying. Although if there's a zombie apocalypse, I'm going to his house fast. But there's something to take away from that, is that man is fearless. He probably isn't fearless, but he's succeeding because when someone tells him he can't, he goes, betcha I can. And if we could all take a little bit of that, do you not think if we were all 20% bolder, we'd all be 50% to 100% more successful?
Yeah, I remember seeing this poster when I was growing up. I used to love Alan Donald. If you remember, him, a cricketer from South Africa.
Did you have the U magazine?
Yeah. I had all these posters in my bedroom, very little bedroom, which I had to share with my sisters and all. So we had this section that had
all sorts of posters.
Yeah, so it's sports posters, and then this other side is called music, because they loved music a lot, and then fashion, and yeah. But I always got bullied, until they then left home, and I was alone now in that room.
You could have all your posters of men
I
that
could
you
have
loved.
everything, and you remember the Scope magazine, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
it was all Reader's Digest, New,
Scope and Hustlers,
and the Bible.
I know my 80s guys know this. So it had a statement on it, and said, courage is not the absence of fear, but it is the mastery
100%
of fear. So
100% right.
I think Elon is doing very well in mastering that fear. Or not just him, but many leaders, bold leaders.
100%.
And I always look at people like Putin. He's the bear. But when I look at him speak, and I think, does he ever get scared? Could he be worried that maybe, just maybe, somebody can just be more powerful than him? And I think
100%.
maybe he has mastered it and just says, you know what? I don't care. You can come for me. I'll come for you. That kind of thing. He's mastered the art.
Well, I don't think you get rid of fear. I think you acknowledge it, and you build the strength to put it where it belongs.
Yeah.
Should you be afraid of walking in long grass in Wange? You absolutely know inherently in your reptile brain, you should be afraid.
Yeah.
Should you be afraid of swimming in Kariba?
Yeah.
Yep. For many reasons, you should be afraid of that.
Yeah.
But should you be afraid of people judging you in a boardroom? Are they going to kill you? Will you die from it?
Perhaps not.
So I think it's acknowledging that you have the fears and putting them where they belong. And I think successful people, I think that's one of the major things they do. They go, of course I'm afraid of failing. Of course I don't want this business to fail. Of course I'm scared of losing money. But more than anything else, I really want to succeed. And if your conviction to succeed is great enough, the fears will seem small and tolerable.
Yeah. And then let's talk about Zimbabwe. You are Zimbabwean. Of course, you went to the UK a little bit.
Yeah.
You ran away from things that were happening at some point. We stayed. We're stronger.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no, man. We are stronger. We're actually stronger. But what's your take on what is required for us to actually succeed as a country in terms of, putting in the work, in terms of, the non-political stuff, because we're very much polarized as a country generally. But what's your take on Zimbabwe, and where do you see us perhaps in the next 5 years or so?
I don't know how to answer the 5-year question, but I can tell you this. Why did my wife and I, doing pretty well in the UK, decided to come back after we had our children? So my oldest daughter was 18 months old. My youngest was 3 months old. Very close gap.
It's like a Warungu.
Don't do math. It's too close.
Dangerous.
Both my children.
Okay.
Great marriage. And we chose to come back to Zimbabwe for two major reasons. One, and this is always sounds stupid to someone who never left Zimbabwe, the weather. But the major reason is that I wanted my children to grow up around, in this environment, around these people. And when I say these people, please understand, I come from a privileged background. And in amongst my white community, people don't like it when I say this. I grew up with white privilege. But it took me leaving the country to experience what was in the first world to realize the degree of privilege that I grew up with.
Yeah.
You know, my parents weren't super wealthy. It wasn't like we were rolling in loot. They were both hardworking people. We've never bought a house. We rented a house my entire life. But because of their absolute obsession,
You actually never owned a house?
my entire family to this day has
Yeah,
never
yeah,
owned a
yeah.
house. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Strange story, hey?
As I maveta no rojo, guys. Please go ahead.
I think you find it's quite common.
We don't know that. The other side of Sabora.
But there is a huge amount of privilege. You know, I was born into a home where on day one I had a maid. And if you think of that transaction alone, means that from the time I could talk, I could ask someone to do something for me and expect it done. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So coming back to Zimbabwe, I got to see them with very clear eyes. And this is where empathy comes in.
Yeah.
We have to understand our journey here. We live in a largely westernized society with a bunch of westernized norms that are now, in this new generation, are forced on our people through YouTube, through Facebook, and there's a yin and a yang to everything. It's wonderful to be super connected and it's wonderful to make the world smaller. But if you force a lot of stuff onto people, you've got to expect them to struggle a bit. I think we're on a, and I don't want to talk the race card, I don't want to talk the politics card, I want to talk about Zimbabweans as a whole, right? The world has evolved so fast around us. Zimbabwe has evolved so fast. Like if you go back to early 1900s to where we are now as a geographical location and the people in it, we have far surpassed the same social evolution that what we saw in Europe, in England, and in Asia. They had hundreds of years. What we've done from 1900 up until 2025 is incredible. But we don't have patience. And we shouldn't have patience. People who have ambition because the ambition has been told to them by YouTube what they could have.
Yeah.
Whether you've been brought up in Mavuko or brought up in Borrowdale, YouTube's telling us there's this whole California life that we should have. You know, the Western world's told us that we have to own a house. You failed if you don't own a house. You know, so we've got this push and pull. So how do I believe Zimbabwe succeeds? I think Zimbabwe needs to succeed by going back to the real basics of what creates success. What creates success more than anything is the right thing, the simple thing, being done consistently over time. And then recording your journey, recording your lessons, and keeping that circle going. And the only way we can do that is to remind ourselves of what are the things that really, really, really matter. You know, look at us right now. You know, there's a large part of our population that's going, hey, 2 kids, enough. And then we have a large part of the population that says the amount of kids I have justifies my success or value as far as my community is concerned. Who's right? If we all have less kids, the population withdraws. Look what's happening in Japan right now. They have population in decline.
Norway is paying people to have children.
So what's right and what's wrong? I can judge someone from having 13 kids, but without the income and ability to support them. But I'm looking from a rational perspective. He's looking from a cultural and tribal perspective. Who's right and who's wrong? There's somewhere in the middle. We need to come together as Zimbabweans and decide what good is for our society. We need to do our best to educate each other on the different cultures that exist. And I'm not talking black, white. We have a huge Indian population that's Hindu. We have a huge Indian population that's Muslim. We have a black population that's Muslim. We have a black population that's Christian. We have a black atheist population, white atheist. You know, we have to accept a little bit what I think Nelson Mandela started in South Africa in the Rainbow Nation. How do we put all our cards in and take a little bit of empathy out and create a constitution, a societal constitution that says this is what good is, and then we all get together and do it. Right? If you look at Norway and Germany and Sweden, they have a very clear social constitution and that everyone conforms to.
Yeah, Germany is one of those. It's something.
But we must.
I got a shock of life when I got there. Like you know,
incredible, isn't
it? On the tram, what they call the tram. So I went in there and I sat. I was expecting someone to come and ask me for a ticket, and they didn't. And I just first day I went free ride. Trains are free here. And I said, no, we actually pay for them. Oh, okay, cool. But I was asking myself all the time. So that imagine if I was back home, Baba, the windy would be asking me, Mdara.
100%.
Come. And it's that's a different social
Yeah.
construct that we don't see in and I agree with you.
But that came from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Just
Of course,
probably
they agreed,
2,000 years ago.
Yeah, they agreed on something,
Yeah.
without necessarily sitting down and agreeing
100%.
on it. And they live. But do you think we have a bit of that as Zimbabweans in a way?
Yes,
Or-
of course.
or
I think
still have some
all
work to do?
societies have it naturally. None of us believe killing is good, right?
Yeah.
Zimbabweans are a peaceful nation.
And none of
They're
us
peaceful
believe
people.
cheating is good.
None of us really believe it's good. We'll justify it when we've done it,
Yeah.
right? But we all have social norms, I think, that are fairly well
Just
felt.
as an aside, like, do you guys have small houses in Warungu side?
We call them complexes. They're just small buildings.
No, Kiaran.
See what I did there?
No,
I was avoidant.
I see what you did.
Mate, I think as long as in any culture, when you have marriage, there are small houses from time to time. But I
Imagine them in your community. They can work community.
I don't think it's authorized. It's an unauthorized action.
It's not authorized.
Hey?
We don't authorize it.
Why do you have 3 phones?
Huh?
Why do you have 3 phones? If I came home with 3 phones, my wife would be like, "No, friend. There's 2 options."
I see what it did there. But anyway, we're just trying to have fun. So Zimbabwe is a country that has its own struggles, really.
Yeah.
But I think the social construct, like you're saying, pretty much has some agreement somewhere.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can sit across the divide, talk to each other, understand each other, or even if we're fighting at the worst case scenario. I witnessed a funeral during the land issues.
Yes.
Those were very painful, especially for my race and your race. But I witnessed a guy where I come from in Beitbridge. Things were so bad, but he lost one of his farm workers.
Yeah.
And he happened to be my uncle. The way he cried, this guy, I was like, dude.
Yeah.
Are you sure
Yeah.
everything is okay? But it wasn't okay for him because he felt very close to this person, and he would actually, as I grew up, then I got to also become very close to him. God bless his soul. He became a mentor of sorts.
Yeah.
But that's a very weird way of doing things, and you would think you could never see that. How has that been for you as a business person, relating from a race perspective? Because that's a very big thing. That we've come from. You talk about the 1900s, that's when, our civilization sort of started in a way, but we already had it anyways, which is going to be a conversation for another.
No, absolutely. Both existed.
Yeah.
But not like today.
But yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
So when we started there, what's your view there of that relationship, and how has it been for you as a Murungu?
Yeah.
And, vis-a-vis.
So growing up, I didn't live in a traditional white home.
Yeah.
My parents have always been very proactive, racism was not a flippant option. Not on religious grounds, but on the grounds of this is not allowed.
Yeah.
This is not normal for us. Mm-hmm. So there was always a bit of push and pull with my other white families who had endemic racism.
Yeah.
And we didn't really know what that meant for us. Mm-hmm. Coming back to Zimbabwe was such an interesting thing because I had it in my head that I would come back and have a society to join because I went to school with these guys.
Yeah.
My Facebook's full of them.
Yeah.
I came back and I realized that I had no alignment with a lot of my white community.
Oh.
I had no alignment with a lot of the black community. I didn't understand. From 18 years old, I was in England. My formative years, I didn't get to understand what Shona culture was and anything other than as a teenager, which is sheltered and not true. So my journey back into Zim was fairly hard to understand that, do I hang out with these guys? Do I make friends with these guys? Do I do business with these guys? How do I do business with these guys? They're telling me not to trust them. They're telling me that they're stealing. I had to find my own path. and again, I come back to the greatest weapon being empathy. You cannot have empathy unless you talk to someone.
Yeah. Because you don't understand.
You can have a surface of empathy, but I can't. If I don't understand that you have how many kids, if I don't try and understand your life, never mind before I look at the fact that you're black and I'm white.
Yeah.
Never mind about where you grew up and where I grew up, where you play cricket, where I play cricket. That doesn't matter. Who is chief today?
Yeah.
What's the marital struggles he's likely to be having? That's the little empathy that only comes from having a coffee with someone or just ask them a few more questions. That was my greatest opportunity. My first major job in Zim is I was running a chicken abattoir and growing program. And then you get to meet agri workers, slaughter workers, sales guys from supermarkets, the white guys who are growing chickens that I needed. The whole market spectrum I got to go see, and I was forced to go and meet them on a day-to-day basis. Game
And
changer.
have relationships.
100%.
Yeah, of course.
100%.
So
Also, let me just say this.
yeah.
Any society throughout time, the moment two people from different sides of the fence, whether it be religious or race or anything, the moment they have to deal with a hardship together, a lot of your differences disappear because you're now bonded. But from sports, you train a lot with someone. We were talking about one of your hard coaches. Those guys, you probably have a different bond to the other guys that you played a little club with because you bonded through friction and pain.
Absolutely.
And I think that's all part of time. So for evolution.
Terrible pain. I tell you that. It's tough being a sportsman. Okay. So, Kiaran, I think we obviously have to switch off the cameras now, but continue with our conversation. Before we do so, like I did say, we just let these guys into our conversation as we're having it. What would be your advice, perhaps, to a young Zimbabwean now, or young African?
Yeah.
Because we are now a global community, really. We're just there by geographical location. Yeah. But what would be your advice to somebody who's trying to start something? What could they possibly do? How can they live their life?
Someone trying to start something. So I'm assuming we're talking
business-wise.
100%. First things first. Understand what business is in its most basic principle. What problem are you solving? For who are you solving it for? What's the value of the solution? And how do I plan to do this over and over again? Do not get excited. Have an ambition, write it down and put it out of your mind and come back to the day-by-day steps to building it. I think excitement, ambition, and fear are the things that steal the best ideas that we ever create. The moment you start winning, your ambition takes over and you start spending your money too fast. Right? You start overdeveloping it because you're like, oh, I've developed this. I'll guarantee. Do it. Just do the little things over and over and over again until the natural opportunity comes. Number 2, be very careful on who you surround yourself with. You have to understand what your value system is, what line you're not prepared to cross for money, and who the people you surround yourself with actually make up who you are. It doesn't matter if you were born in a rural area, high density area, low density area, money, no money, church, it doesn't matter. Good business is done with good people, and your mind is a thing that's going to create your business. It's going to induce your effort. It's going to manage your fear. And if you surround yourself with people that corrupt your mind, you're going to corrupt yourself. So keep it simple. Manage your fear and excitement. Be very careful about who you surround yourself with. And then finally, my greatest weapon, I failed at school, read. Read. I
How many books
consume
do you read like in a year?
I probably do about one and a half books a month. No, more than that. I do audiobooks. So whenever I'm in the car sitting in our lovely traffic, I'm consuming books. I read nonfiction. I love reading biographies of people who I emulate. I consume it.
What are you currently reading?
Consume it. I am currently reading Entrepreneurship 2.0 by Jim Collins. It's the second time I've read it.
It's a good book.
It's a good book. I find him to be it's a hard listen. I don't know what it's like to read. I can't focus on it. But it's a hard listen because as you're listening, you kind of want to make notes, and making notes while driving is probably a bad idea. Yeah. But Jim Collins is incredible. Yeah.
So which application do you use for your book?
Audible.
Man.
I'm not paid for the subscription.
I pay for the basic subscription, and then I get a couple of credits.
Is there another one?
Well, there's plenty.
Yeah, dude.
There's a lot of.
I end up buying extra because I'm out of the credit.
Yeah.
Did you know? Just a handy hint: you can refund your books if you don't like it.
Oh, you can?
I'll teach you after.
See, play with the right people. So tell me one question. Of course, out of interest and excitement, of course. Yeah. Do you guys have mbingas in the white community here in Harare?
Describe what an mbinga is to me. please. I want a definition. I want the definition.
Mbinga is a guy or a girl who has obnoxious amounts of money, and they are not afraid to flaunt it. They can talk about it anywhere and they can say whatever they want. Do you have those guys?
Of course we do. I think every community has them. But let me tell you something I heard the other day, which I'm sure has been said a million times.
Yeah.
Money talks, but wealth whispers. Which would you like to surround yourself?
Did you hear that, guys? On that note, I think, Kiaran, thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it.
I'll see you soon.
Certain noise. Enjoy the cash quietly. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
For the show. I think we will give you another episode. We're going to catch up with him sometime later in the year. We want to see if he's finished his 52 books, because they say at least 52 weeks means one book per week. Yeah, try and get that going in your busy schedule. But you can always find Kiaran at ABC Auctions. He's the guy behind that. Like I want a career as an auctioneer. Yeah. So can I like?
If you're an app, because I think our business runs because
you're no longer doing it.
No. If you go into
going twice.
Watch this plug quickly. Apple iStore, Google Play Store, ABC Auctions. That's our auctioneer. 24 hours a day, 27 auctions a week.
You know what? I was going to tell you that I actually sold the Scotland jersey for $260,000. I thought I was an auctioneer. I thought I had a career. That's why I got you to the show. I wanted to talk to you on the side. Say, can I get a job?
Willing buyer, willing seller. Willing buyer, willing seller.
He's not doing that. He's doing digital things. But thanks, guys. I really appreciate you. We love you so much.
Speaking beyond our borders, on land, on the seas and in the air. That was the Chief Koti Show.